or c4.
Okay. What is Magnus going to go for? It is the Nimzo Indian defense. Black's bishop comes out for an early pin. And, okay, I like this choice from Jan. He gives Black a lot of options. The downside being that Magnus has studied the Nimzo Indian since he was a kid, since these two first met all those years ago. And it is Jan, actually, to start thinking early on.
Actually, I was going to ask you at the start of the show, David, we had that photograph on, right, from the World Under-12 when these two played. I think it was the second time ever that they faced each other in that tournament. Looking back at that time, by the way, we do have it, Taraj. We'll get into the position. But are there certain characteristics that you remember from back then, which you see them employ even now?
Yes, they're both even stronger now, of course. But the first time I met Jan was back in, I think, 2000. And he was so quick, so confident with his moves. That is still the same to this very day. And yeah,
he'd play fast.
He'd play fast. He'd play very dynamic chess. And he's never changed his colors there. And that's why he's so good. He's plays true to his strengths, true to his style. And he's just worked on that and kind of, yeah, perfecting what he knows he's good at. Magnus, meanwhile, was always good at the endgames. When I played him back in 2002, nearly ground me down in like an 80-move endgame.
Even as an 11-year-old.
Even as an 11-year-old. And now, 22 years later, still grinding away opponents, as we saw in game 1 of today's match. In the meantime, this Nimzo Indian is a bit of a weird pawn structure. Both sides have intruder pawns, as I call them, on each other's side. Black capturing a pawn on c4, white capturing a pawn on c5. So these pawns should fall off the board in the near future, you would think. But how do you pick them up? That is question number 1. If white gets one more move, might play queen a4 check. And, okay, that check has been blocked. I was going to say the queen could well try and grab this pawn. The alternative for white is to move this knight out the way. I'm, again, not sure where. You have a choice of squares. And the white bishop might be tasked with the job to grab on c4. Meanwhile, the black knight is doing the hunting of the white pawn. It does feel like if these pawns disappear, though, it's going to be totally symmetrical, the pawn structure. And in terms of winning chances, you don't want symmetry. That's the last thing you want. So Jan pondering if there's any alternatives right now. If there's any way to try to mix things up, muddy the waters, imbalance everything.
Question is where, yeah, he's trying to figure out, which I'm doing the same as well, is the knight better on d4 or f4? And really, it's just about your setup afterwards is what we're figuring out. Where does the knight go? Do I go to d4? Cool, that's nice. But then what are the next, 3-4 moves to follow as well? You want to think in plans, what I like to teach students. Think in plans. Like, what's the plan? Knight f4, bishop takes c4, castles? Knight d4, rook g1, g4? Like, what is the plan, right? But that's what he's thinking about here. And it's a great question because if you put the knight on the wrong square, it could definitely dictate the rest of the game here. So knight g3 doesn't seem as active, but I think he may go there because he wants to maybe stop a knight e4 potentially after a bishop c3 type idea. Knight f4 is a move.
Well, he's got to move the knight out of the way, and I completely agree, James.
Right.
You have to figure out the right square for it. I also like the g3 square because you are sometimes eyeing h5 jumps as well. Yeah. Bishop takes pawn, knight h5 after you go shut castle, and looking at some ideas on the king side. It's not an easy choice, but Jan needs to make it quickly because this is not a decisive choice. You place your knight on any of these 3 squares. I think all are just different approaches to the position. But what you don't want to end up doing is lose a lot of time on the clock right now.
That's actually happening, in fact. I mean, not too much time, but he is thinking.
Yeah, I think I would be reluctant to put my knight on either of these 2 squares because I'd also be slightly afraid of being hit by the black e-pawn with gain of time. So maybe g3 is the safest for now. But yeah, this isn't Jan at its most kind of free-flowing. Normally, he's just bashing out the moves, trusting his instincts. That's the Jan that kind of has had so much success throughout his career. He does choose the g3 square. But 2 minutes down on the clock, Magnus, I'm assuming, is going to capture this pawn before it runs away, before it's too late.
All right, guys, what do you think Magnus is going to play? He may move quickly, he may not. But, of course, it is up to you to play take, 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 like download take, take, take. Of course, when you hear take, 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 you immediately think, obviously, captures, 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 but also downloading take, take, take. You can go to go.chess.com/takex3, and then you can also use exclamation point take, take, take in chat. Go now. So, Magnus move. What do we do? Castles, knight takes c5.
You said take, take, take. I think he's got to take that pawn on c5.
Take on c5.
Right now.
Okay, cool.
That would be my guess, the move on take, take, take.
Black's going to take, then white's going to take this one, then black's going to take this one, then white's going to take this one.
Okay.
Then the queens will take.
Okay.
Yeah, this is a position that could fizzle out if Magnus is accurate, maybe, but at the meantime, there is a big threat, pawn to b4. There's also one big trap that we should show. Black's most tempting move, at least to me at first sight, was knight to d3 check, but because now you get the bishop pair, the black queen swoops, but at the very end, whoops, loose pieces drop off. There's a double attack, a check, and it is the bishop that falls, so Magnus, of course, saves that bishop in the current position. He retreats back to the c7 square, and now he has his eyes on any checks. The white king runs away first. Castles, castles, now the white queen likely to move. White rooks will enter the center before their counterparts. It's not a big advantage, but I do think Jan should be pretty happy with the outcome of the opening because Black is struggling to develop this problem piece at home, and White's rooks are coming. b4 in the air as well to kick away this knight.
I think it's... Sorry, David.
No, you go on, Tanya.
It's absolutely essential to get the pieces out for Magnus right now, right? The bishop that you pointed out, and there are two ways of doing it. You could either expand on the queen side and try to create activity with the idea of a6, b5 and put the bishop on b7, or go bishop to d7 and bishop c6 because that's the diagonal that you want it in. Magnus plays bishop d7, but for an instant I thought, 1 second, b4, and isn't the knight trapped? But then you realize that there are squares on the a file that you can move to.
Yeah, b4 would have been met by the black knight coming to a4 and trading off now that the black bishop on d7 defends that square. So instead, we see the black queen shuffle out the way. Very symmetrical, though. That surely can't be great news for Jan's winning chances in this almost must-win encounter.
But there's still a little bit something, right? Because that dark square bishop landing on b4, the piece activity, the momentum, the tempo that you can play on for as white. If you give Magnus just a couple of moves to consolidate, put the bishops on the right square, get that rook on d8, get those rook on the central lines, and then you're looking at a dead equal position. But I think the next 2 to 3 moves, James, are absolutely critical for white to create that initiative through piece activity.
Oh, hold on, Magnus is about to move. Let's see first.
Bishop's hanging, you got to move the bishop.
Okay, so you bishop b5, so now, yeah, okay.
Bishop b4, he pins it.
There's an f4 idea here, too. I can kind of push him back a little bit, f4, e4, e5 type ideas, which could be very loose for the bishop on d7. Also can play f4 and bring the bishop back to c3, threatening b4, bishop takes f6, rook d7.
But which is why it's important that right now for Magnus to be on the momentum, right? To try to create his own threats. And maybe the idea of advancing on the queen side with tempos, pushing Jan's pieces back with a6, b5 is something that comes to my mind, David.
Yeah, I was actually looking, I mean, I love your idea. I think this knight needs to just get gone. You need to kick it away. But also a5, just to break the pin. This pin is slightly uncomfortable. The only downside to Black's position. So, okay, he chooses your move. He might go for that next. He wants to get rid of this bishop in the near future as well. But no immediate threat. This knight is protected. The black bishop also protected. So everything's hanging together just about for Magnus. And if Jan has to start retreating, he's not going to be too happy. Okay, there we go. He had to retreat simply, but now Magnus does. He combined our plans. We both guessed the move. You first, though. And that bishop likely to retreat.
But that's really smart of him, right? Because he didn't just push back one piece. He first pushes back the knight and then goes in with David's idea of forcing the bishop to fall back.
And look at that view. Full house here in Oslo.
Man.
Woohoo!
Whoa! And you know, there's actually the two-way mirror there is pretty fire, as you can see through, but the players can't see back out. It's a mirror for them, so it's pretty awesome.
Yeah. When the players look towards the audience, they just see themselves being reflected. So greatness looking back at greatness.
Absolutely.
Magnus often looks over to that side, so just checking out his hair, I don't know, just admiring his position in the mirror. But either way, fantastic to see. I love those headphones, by the way. Shout out to everyone down there. But yeah, in the meantime, this is, again, high-quality games so far from Jan. It's just about whether he can eke out any chances. It's definitely Magnus with the questions to answer, though. There might be some threats, positional threats at least, to gain the bishop pair if the white knight in the center jumps out the way. Yeah, Magnus spending some time.
No, I just love what we just saw, right? Because it shows how far chess has come as a spectator sport. To be there live in the audience, you can hear the commentary, you can watch your favorite players, and you can see the commentary on the Jumbotron right there. I mean, this is really the dream, right? From a couple of years ago to now, just how much progress it's made. And now from here, it's only upwards and onwards because it feels like finally that barrier to chess becoming a spectator sport is being broken.
Yeah, and Champions Chess Tour, the future, is exciting too. It's now going to become part of the Esports World Cup. So this is just the beginning. And great to see it happening here in Oslo.
Yeah, your city.
Yeah. City is
With a live audience.
of the world number 1, 2, Magnus Carlsen, who is thinking, doesn't look comfortable, Magnus. It's not one-way traffic. It's a very tense middle game.
Yeah, because now Jan's bishop is lined up to Magnus's bishop, and some knight jumps in the air, capturing that bishop on e5. Knight c6 could be a threat. Magnus lines up the rook on d8 for a trade. Are there any knight jumps that would bring Jan the bishop pair?
Yeah, I think Jan here frowning, a bit surprised at Magnus's last move. He's like, wait, what's happened there? You're allowing me to grab your dark squared bishop. And I think we'll see it play out on the board. But not too many options, not too many productive moves for white. So he's likely to start trading off pieces. But it's about which pieces you trade off. If you get the bishop pair, it's a relatively open center, no pawns blocking things. So I think that is a gain for white, a small gain at least.
Jan looked up at us.
He has to maybe try to push as well. He has to maybe try to push. What do you think? F4? If F4, bishop D4, you go bishop or rook D4? That's the question.
He's fiddling with some pawns. Will he push a pawn? That is your question, James. Will he push a pawn of his own to start attacking? Big moment, bit of a crossroads. Does he play slowly, positionally, or does he try to change the pace of the game?
Yeah, big moment here. Because if I had to guess the move right now, it would be knight c6. I want that bishop pair.
There we go.
There we go, Tanya. Takes?
Takes, and
Takes.
yeah, I mean, it's looking good. The bishops are beautifully placed on that e5 square, the bishop on c4. I think Magnus needs to be careful in this position. Just long term, Jan has got a strategic advantage.
It's equal material, but the longer the games go on, the more the bishops gain in power. Bishop to a4 is aiming to kick this rook away to fight for the open d-file. And yeah, still, it's a long way to go. If these bishops ever get traded, the light squared bishops, then the power of the pair are somewhat dampened. But right now, yeah, I think he should just get rid of one set and then try to start improving his remaining rook. Maybe start pushing forward in the center. I'm not sure exactly how. You normally want to put your pawns on light squares if you have a dark squared bishop and your opponent doesn't. Yeah, still a long way to go, but he's at least obtained goal number 1. Small positional advantage for white.
And maybe to neutralize that, Magnus has in mind of offering that trade on b3 with his own bishop, doesn't allow it first. Jan jumps in, gets rid of those rooks. I also want to point out that pawn on a5, you know, at some point that is the undefended pawn which can be put under fire. Right now, Jan plays rook c1, bishop b3 will be met by a trade and the rook penetrating into the 7th rank.
Yeah, white's rook has potential. This position has potential for Jan, I've got to say. And if it comes down to 1 minute each, then this could really, this could be the comeback. I don't think Magnus enjoys having these slight positional deficiencies here. He doesn't like facing the bishop pair. Most of the top players love the bishops, so he knows he's just playing for 2 results at the moment. He's just trying to hold, just trying to lock things down and be solid. This is a good bishop for black, it should be said. But if the queens and rooks come off, I think Jan has great chances. Okay, he does allow an exchange of 1 set.
Okay.
He wants his queen to come in.
Voluntary offering a bishop trade. And to your point, look at Magnus. He's leaned in right now. You know, usually you see him just chilling on his chair, twirling with a piece, just as I say it.
Yeah, a bit of a shake
What are you talking about?
Bit of shake of the head from both, actually, there. Look at them, in tandem, dancing with their heads, bobbing.
Listen to the same song. We're in sync.
That would be cool, right? Just that they agree on a soundtrack together.
Come on, bro, let's vibe.
The heart will go
If
on.
you had to have a song on while you're playing James, which one would it be?
Have to? That's a good question. Honestly, I like classical. I'm just listening to classical music, believe it or not. It's I think there's also some studies that show that, you know, you can actually study better with classical music on. And the reason for that is because, you know, I grew up actually around, you know, OGs, old heads that are at the chess club blasting music. And talking trash and playing blitz chess. It was fun. Grew up like that. But it's harder to play when lyrics are in your head. When someone's talking, you just can't. I mean, for me, I just cannot focus as much. Now on stream it's different because we're streaming and blasting music and like having a great time. But overall, I like to have no sound, like no words. What about you, Tanya?
I'm with you. I think you want to be completely focused. It's hard to concentrate when there's good music on because I'm so distracted with what's being said and I want to vibe to it. Hard to do many.
Right.
I'm not much of a multitasker. By the way, the rook has landed on the 7th rank.
Whoa.
And that looks like a big rook there. There are a lot of weaknesses on Magnus's left side of the board. B7 pawn, A5 pawn. Has Jan managed to create chances in this one? He wins a pawn.
Wins a pawn. It's holding together as well. The white queen has to defend her bishop, but now the white rook will do the job after a trade of queens. And it's about whether Magnus can hold this. He's likely going to be a pawn down in the ensuing endgame. And Jan bobbing his head, but the white knight is a bit misplaced, unable to get into the action. So the black rook is now going to come down, maybe with a check, or maybe it's going to go pawn hunting on the b file. Either way, Jan cannot lose this one. It's just about whether he can win. He needs to win.
It's an opportunity, right? You've got this healthy pawn. You're also up on the clock by 2 minutes. He jumps in with the rook, Magnus, and now I think he wants to block the attack next on that a5 pawn by bringing his knight to the center of the board, next to where the white rook stands, blocking the connection to that queenside pawn.
Yeah, first, a dilemma, actually, for Jan. If he moves his king out of the check, then the black rook steps up with a double attack on 2 separate pawns. But the only way to keep the f-pawn defended is to self-pin and drop the white knight back to block this check. Hence the reason he's spending 30 seconds on what looks like a simple check. Okay, he does ultimately drop back. Oh. Yeah, it's never nice to pin your own pieces, right?
And wow, he pushes the a-pawn. I was expecting the knight to jump into activity, but now the white rook can also line up against that a4 pawn. How are you defending this after rook a5?
Yeah, I guess once the white rook moves, the black knight might start jumping towards the white knight. The pin is very awkward, so he pushes his own pawns forward. He's getting ready to move his king off the back rank. Really classy move. In an endgame, a pawn on g4 often has a nice clamping effect as well.
That's a very nice point. The rook goes away, knight e4, knight d2 would have been very, very deadly. So he wants to first unpin by improving his own king. But that a4 pawn, if Jan can get to it at any time, that would be just game over with these 2 passes on the queen side.
Yeah, and Magnus can go for white's weakest pawn. That is the b pawn, sitting on b2. But that does give Jan a free hand. The white rook will suddenly be able to move a-pawns, especially if the rooks ever come off. Knights are so bad at stopping those pawns running. We saw that in Jan's semi-final yesterday against Fallujah. So many knight endgames there, and it was always about the a and h pawns running down the board. So Magnus still with some big questions to answer. He tries to block the white rook out, meanwhile, but the white rook can slide back 1 square.
Probably going to do that.
And then I think black rook slides over to the b pawn as well. So you're going to end up trading the b pawn for the a pawn. And still a very healthy extra pawn for white, you know, and that a-pawn, once it starts rolling up the board, we've seen it. And you said it, David, against that knight, a very tough pawn to keep defended and keep under control. Jan needs to activate his knight, and I think he's about to do just that. He brings it towards the center of the board. Magnus combining his own rook and knight to create some threats here.
Yeah, the black knight and rook are so active, but they do lack, especially the black knight, kind of stable squares. So can Jan hold it? Oh, he's trading off the knight's Magnus. He's forcing a rook and pawn endgame.
Yeah,
very clever.
It should be a draw, but obviously I have the extra pawn, but you know it's not easy to draw, but it is very possible to draw due to the rook being behind the a pawn there. White can maybe create something on the king side, but I think Magnus is not too mad about it.
You know, it should be a draw, never ends well in commentary, James. And you said black's rook is nicely placed behind the white pawn, but also the white rook gets in front of it. And now the whole idea is, does white have enough time to get the king to the other side of the board? Is this closer to a draw or a Jan win, David?
Well, I studied this exact endgame without the e-pawns on the board, when it's 3 versus 3 on the same side. And that is a draw, and quite, well, I would say quite a relatively straightforward one at the top level, but with extra pawns on the board, it normally helps the side with the extra material. That is Jan Nepomniachtchi right now. It will be a race. The white king will start to run sooner or later, but first he's pushing his pawn as far down the board as possible.
But if you push it 1 more step ahead, then it's just a draw. Theoretically improving, because your aim is to get that king to that a7 square in front of the pawn. You need that shelter for it to survive. So Jan, he pauses now. How does he improve the position of his king? That's the big question. Meanwhile, time trouble also approaching.
Maybe king g2 and you run all the way around. King g2, king g1, all the way to b1, run the king up. That's the general thing. But you have to be careful of hanging the f pawn. So he's trying to figure out all that out. And king f3 might be answered with an f5 to try to restrict the king. So king g2, and then maybe get the king to f1, maybe e1, play f3.
Whoa.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that was not.
Surprise you, David?
Definitely surprising.
Very surprising. The white rook is totally frozen now. That being said, the black rook is also frozen, can never move off the A line. It can only kind of step forward and back now, can never go across to grab any white pawns.
Whoa.
Okay, the eval bar approves of Jan's decision, but he should stop trading now. He needs to fix the structure on the king side.
H5 or something.
Keep as many pawns on as possible.
I'm so surprised because usually, traditionally in these endgames, you just don't push the a pawn. But Yan clearly knows what he's doing. We saw the bar say that this is the best move in the position. He doesn't trade. He says, Magnus, you take on h4, I destroy your pawn formation. That pawn is a lying duck for my king to pick up anyway. Magnus just playing the waiting game now.
Yeah, it's so hard to make progress with white. It's just so hard because like you're always going to get the what is it, the Philidor position checks basically on A1, B1, C1, wherever you run the king when you go up to B6 or B7 or C7, anywhere up there. So how do you make progress exactly is the question. Maybe it goes, yeah.
That last move by Yan, right? It made a weakness of the E3 pawn. Doesn't allow the white king to actually come for the H4 pawn. And now how do you improve this? Your king is tied down to defending that H pawn that Magnus has.
That's a good move. E5 was sick, boy. That was nice.
Now the black rook giving a check. It's simply going to come back on the next move. Actually, he's going to continue checking the white king. And the white king's never going to step across. This is bizarre what Yan has done, to be honest. He should have just pushed his pawn to h5 while he could have done. Now this black h-pawn is a real thorn, tying down the white king. The white rook cannot move. This game is going to end any moment.
Yep, there it is.
It's a draw.
Wow. A missed opportunity by Yan. You know, he was the one pushing with the white pieces, had that extra pawn. But in this endgame, technique, some inaccuracies there, and Magnus Carlsen showing incredible defense, sacrificing his pawn on e5.
Bishop b5 before, of course, very unpleasant.
Yeah.